The timing here contextually not great. Why for your client? There's a lot of awareness about on-campus rape and a failure to report, and we want to bolster the confidence of victims in this. And now we hear about this case where it seems like a young woman comes forward. The young man involved admits that he did things that were unwanted and wrong and seems to get a slap on the wrist. Explain it from your perspective.
Well, I think Sir Young, the defendant in this case, got everything except a slap on the wrist. Here's a situation where this kid was not your typical sex offender. What we have here is an 18-year-old high school student who was very talented, very gifted, had scholarship offers to a couple of universities, who had a relationship with this young lady and found himself in a position at school where he had previous discussions with her about having sex, and she had agreed to that. She just didn't want to have sex on the school premises. Immediately upon making this bad judgment, he admitted that he proceeded over her objections to stop, and he admitted that to the police. We don't think that he qualifies as your typical sex offender. This is not somebody who has preyed on some young kids or unsuspecting people, and we just figured that the sentence that he ultimately received in this case was a fair and appropriate sentence.
Look, this is difficult. You don't want to see any young lives ruined. There's no question about it. I don't think anyone's suggesting this guy lines up as some type of like monster serial rapist, obviously. But, you know, sometimes the personal context helps, Scotty. Imagine if it's your daughter involved. You read this kid's statement. She keeps saying no, no, no. And yeah, yes, there is some kissing that resumes by his own statement after she says no, but there's a lot of no. And he seems to be very shocked and embarrassed and worried and scared afterwards. What part of that seems right or normal to you?
Well, here you have a situation where the kid was obviously in a situation where he made a very, very bad judgment, But I submit to you that the sentence he received was anything other than a slap on the wrist, a 5-year probated sentence that's going to require him to serve 45 days in jail, report to jail every year on the anniversary of this incident. In addition to that, this kid, who had a very promising future, is going to have to register as a sex offender for probably the rest of his life. We submit that that's just not a slap on the wrist, especially under those facts and circumstances.
Now, when you lay it out that way, I understand that there's punitive value going toward him. What do you think about the judge's disposition in this case? Do you think she's adding fuel to the fire where she seems to do that old school blaming the victim? She's not your typical victim. She had other lovers. She had a baby, which, by the way, the victim's family, as you know, says isn't true. You think she made it worse for your client, the judge?
No, I think the judge was put in a very uncomfortable position. The judge has the responsibility to fashion the terms and conditions of probation to satisfy the specific rehabilitative needs of this particular defendant. I believe she did that. The problem here lied in the fact that the judge did not have an opportunity to fully explain and expound on the purpose for sending him to community service at the Rape Crisis Center. I believe that typically in these types of situations, a fair and impartial judge, as this judge is, would have explained to her probation officer that she did not intend for him to be engaged in counseling sessions with victims, but what she wanted was for him to be in an environment, mopping floors or cutting grass, that would allow his sensitivities to be heightened, that he knows he made a bad judgment.
Sure.
And that there are ramifications for that.
I got
obviously.
that. I guess, look, I don't think that that's the flashpoint. I mean, certainly it is for the crisis center. They've made that an issue. But the idea of defining her sexual background, it does seem that the judge was running this victim down, who was 14 at the time, I guess 17 now, as a way of making this a less severe assault. Do you understand the problem with that?
Yes, I do. But I think what the judge was ultimately trying to do was to explain why she treated this defendant differently. The judge had access to the facts and circumstances that the general public didn't have access to. The judge actually reviewed those medical records. And I don't think this was any attempt to run down the victim in as much as it was to explain why this defendant should not be treated as your typical sex offender, because ultimately he is not.